It's a two-part book?
No.
Oh, is it the same
This
book?
one we brought for anyone who wants to purchase. We're going to be learning from it today as well.
Oh.
This is my book. This is my copy.
Okay.
A little more worn out. Okay, so what we're going to do today is I wanted to finish the subject we began regarding davening for women. Obviously not the whole thing. I mean, the whole thing is a number of classes, but we began last week a discussion regarding what are the parts of davening that a woman is obligated in. And for the remainder of the class, I want to cover the laws and minhagim of Purim. We're going to do this week and next week, and then Meretz Hashem. For the rest of the classes till Pesach, we're going to cover the laws of Pesach, so we're only going to resume this course after Pesach is over.
How about the fast of Esther? We can talk about that?
We will talk about it, sure. We're going to talk about it next week.
Okay.
Next week it's going to be more close. This week I want to just cover Zachar, Pasha Zachar, and we'll start with Shlach Manas, Matanah Salvanim, etc.
Oh, it's this week, Pasha Zachar.
Yeah, Zachar's this week.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's recap from last week what we did so far regarding davening obligations for women, and then we'll continue from where we left off. What we explained last week thus far was that there are 7/8 mitzvahs fulfilled during davening. Some of these mitzvahs women are obligated in, some of these mitzvahs women are exempt from, but nonetheless, as we know, even if a woman is exempt from a mitzvah, if she decides to fulfill them, she gets schar for doing so. So bottom line, there's 7 to 8 positive commands that are fulfilled during davening by anybody who davens and goes through the mitzvahs that we mentioned last week. We said lechatchila, a woman is to daven the entire nusach just like a man, no difference. Initially, a woman is to daven the whole shachris, the whole mincha, just like a man davens without subtracting anything. The only part we mentioned that can be subtracted, as is customary by many women, is tachanun. Many women are accustomed not to say tachanun, but other than tachanun, everything initially is said just like a man. We mentioned that there are some Sephardi women who do not follow this, and they rather omit the brachas of Baruch She'amar and Yishtabach. Anything that has a bracha that they're not obligated in, they omit because they hold that they cannot say blessings that they are not obligated in. We discussed this last week in length. This is a custom by some Sephardi women today, but the main custom of Sephardic women was and remains to daven everything just like a man. We also discussed in length last week regarding Zman Tefillah, and we explained there that there is no special or different laws applicable to women regarding Zman Tefillah, and all the times given for men likewise apply to women. And in this case, there's a chashash of a brach levatala even to daven outside of the times that were set by Chazal, and thereby obviously it should not be done. Practically what we explained is that Shachris begins from sunrise, lechatchila until the 4th hour of the day, which nowadays here in Tzfas, on this date of Gimel Adar Sheni, is about 9:50. That's Seif Zman Tefillah. That's the lechatchila time for davening. While Chatzos is the next step, the next bus stop, the late bus stop.
To end by that hour? Or
To begin Shemana Esrei by that hour.
to begin?
Well, the truth is, I'm sorry, to end Shemana Esrei by that hour,
By
yes.
9:50?
The 9:50 is the lechatchila time, yes. So we're going to today. We're going to go into each part of davening and dissect it, and see are women exempt from it or not. We already discussed Shemana Esrei last week. You weren't here last week, but Shemana Esrei we covered last week. But we're going to touch upon that again. Bottom line is, again, it doesn't matter whether women are exempt or not exempt. Zman Tefillah is not going into the discussion of whether women are obligated to daven or not obligated to daven. Whether they're obligated or not, doesn't matter what side of the argument you hold of, which opinion you hold of, it makes no difference. You cannot say brachas outside of the time. Even if we say a woman's not obligated in shofar. Does that mean that right now, today after class, you should say a bracha with Hashem's name, al tkiyah shofar, and blow shofar? Of course not. There's even a question if she can do that on Rosh Hashanah itself because she's exempt. And there, the Ashkenazi custom and most Sephardim is it's okay, fine. But to say brachas outside of their time, just because women are exempt from the mitzvah, of course, there is no allowance. We discussed this in length last week. You can look at the audio, video of it. And bottom line, so again, I'm reviewing. Shachris is until 4th hour of the day. B'diavad, you have until Chatzais to begin Shemoneh Esrei before midday. Mincha is from a half hour after midday until sunset. B'diavad, you have until nightfall. 3 stars, about 15 minutes later after sunset, depending where you are in the world. Here in Israel, it's about 15 minutes later in the winter. And Ma'ariv, we explained that women never accepted upon themselves to daven. However, that's regarding Shemoneh Esrei. Ma'ariv we will get to soon. Kriya Shema we will do today. So that's, again, a reminder regarding Zman Tefillah. Let's now go, we're not going to go into, so what is the abridged version of davening that a woman can do in a time of need, etc. So we began this last week, and this is what we're going to finish today. So we explained already last week that no matter what approach one takes in understanding whether a woman is obligated in tefillah or not, everyone agrees that when a person is in need of something from God, they have a mitzvah deraisa to daven, to turn to God and ask Him for it, and that applies whether you're female or male. That form of davening, that form of prayer, everyone is obligated in. And according to the Rambam, one is obligated in that daily. So no matter what approach you take, at the very least, one cannot go a day without praying to God. As no matter what opinion you take, everyone agrees there has to be a daily prayer. The question just is, what has to be the length of the prayer? What type of prayer? Does it have to be Shemoneh Esrei, Shachris? But everyone agrees that there must be some prayer towards God on a daily basis, both by men and women. And therefore, at the very least, a woman is obligated in a time of need to daven to Hashem whenever she's in need, and on a daily basis to daven to Hashem for her needs. So now we went into...
Question, because it has to do with that.
Yeah.
So when you say, I mean, isn't it prayer if I just spoke from my heart? Like,
100%, yes.
Okay. So it doesn't-
At the very least.
At the very least.
At the
yeah.
very least,
Okay,
yeah.
fine.
Well, okay, we're saying that's not the final conclusion is going to be a lot more at the very least. But this is at the very least of the opinions
But
of
that's
prayer.
also considered prayer, because I'm talking to God.
100, of course it is. You're fulfilling a mitzvah deraisa prayer when you talk to God, 100%. When you pray to Him,
Right.
ask Him for Him. Yeah, sure. Okay, so we began Shemoneh Esrei in our dissection of the parts of prayer. And before I go through the dissection, I just want to give the bottom line conclusion, and then we'll go into understanding this conclusion and other opinions, etc. The bottom line conclusion is like this. We already said, initially, a woman davens everything. In a time of need, so she can make her davening go on a diet and put out the following foods from the menu. Take out the following parts of davening from the menu. Okay, so since there's more parts removed than parts entered, so I'll just say what you have to say. Everything I'm mentioning now, this is either an absolute obligation according to all opinions or an obligation according to some opinions, and that's the way we rule. And that's why I'm mentioning it. If there's other opinions, approaches, we will discuss that when we dissect each part individually. But the bottom line, just to give the overview already now of what you're obligated to say in a time of need, it says follows from the beginning of davening. Morning brachas, brachas hashachar. Birchas HaTorah, which is even more obligatory than Birchas HaShachar, but they're both obligatory. Just the level of obligation is greater by Birchas HaTorah. But they're both obligatory in any event.
Wait, Birchas Shachar?
Right. Afterwards, Birchas HaTorah. It doesn't have to be in that order. If you say Birchas HaTorah first, it's also okay. But this is the order printed in the Chabad Siddur. Other Siddurim have Birchas HaTorah first. So that doesn't make a difference. I'm just mentioning the order. Okay, then you can skip everything from there, from after Birchas HaTorah until Parshas HaTamid. Parshas HaTamid is an obligation on a woman to say. That's a small paragraph in the middle of Korbanos.
I wouldn't be able to.
It starts with V'yidaber Hashem al Moshe Lamer, Dabel b'nei Yisrael, Matar lemes Korbani, Lachmi li'ishay reich nichoichi.
on page 18. Oh, this is Parshas Tani?
Is that page 18?
Huh?
What page is that?
In the Siddur? Not sure. Let me
Well, it's
see.
probably
Yeah,
different
19.
Siddurim.
19?
19. No, it's the Hebrew. It's all
No, I understand, but I'm sure
It's
there's different
different, it's
pages in different
different.
Siddurim.
Yeah, I don't know what it's
Okay, but Parshas Hatamid, if you want to know what it is, it's smack in the middle of the Karbanis. It's after the Parshas HaKedah, after Rebbeinu Shalom, after La'olam, after Shema, and after the fire. When you talk about the constant fire that was on the Mizbeach, the Parshas, right, the Trumas Hadeshin, so it's the paragraph after that. And it refers to the two offerings that were brought, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. So women are obligated in that. We're going to go into why. Why are there all these things obligations? But I'm just giving you the overview of what practically you have to say. Okay, you can then skip. Again, this is the absolute, the most, the greatest diet of davening you can have to fulfill your obligation. So we're omitting everything possible that you're not obligated in. Okay, after that you would skip until, it's a long skip from there, all the way until Shema. You skip to Shema and you say Shema Yisrael and Baruch Shem.
This is after Parshas Tani.
Correct.
Okay, sorry. I want to interrupt.
After Shema, you don't even have to say the whole Shema, just Shema and Baruch Shem.
Okay.
You then skip.
Wow.
Again, we're not saying you should do this. This is the slim version for those who really, it's mainly meant for women who don't have time. They're hustling a career with raising crying children.
Yeah.
So this is the slimmest version you can get. It's like someone who has a budget of $500 a month for a family of 10 to buy food. So you have to literally, Chas v'shalom, no one should be in such a situation. But this is how we should view davening as well.
So you
Shouldn't
say
view it,
that-
I just learned I can get away with this. Yeah, you can get away with bread and no butter. You could get away with it, but no one wants to get away with that. Huh?
That's mamish 2 lines, right? Because you don't say they have to.
It is correct. It is 2 lines,
Okay, I'm not
yes.
trying to-
We don't measure Judaism in lines. It's still very powerful.
Okay, sorry. No, because I thought it was also included via hafta, but that was the first. I thought
You don't
had-
have to, no, you don't have to. Again, I'm referring to obligatory,
Right,
okay?
I
Even the Shema and Baruch Shem is not so obligatory. I threw it in there because it's only 2
Really?
lines. And it's written, you should say it. But there's a difference between must, should, biblical, rabbinical. So this is part of the should, okay? But nonetheless, it's there. We're putting it in there, okay? It's very simple, it's easy. The next step is to skip to emes v'yatziv, right after Shema. The paragraph, the blessing of emes v'yatziv is a obligation. When we dissect each part, we will see the level of obligation it is, but it's an obligation. So a woman then says the entire blessing of emes v'yatziv,
What does that translate to?
truth and standing. Until Goal Yisrael, until the start of Shmoneh Esrei. Well, it's one bracha. That whole thing is one bracha. It's not 2 blessings.
Until Shemona Esrei?
Only by
Okay.
Ma'ariv are there 2 blessings after Shema. Shachris is 2 blessings before and 1 after. So the blessing of Shema after Shema, women are obligated in. We say that whole blessing, and then a woman is obligated to go straight into Shmoneh Esrei. Soimech geula l'tefillah. She has to approximate it just like a man, right after she says that paragraph. So in essence, if you don't have time to daven all the parts in one shot, you can do Birchas HaShachar, Birchas HaTorah, Parshas HaTamid. Take a little break. Before Seif Zman Tefillah, you say Shema Yisrael, emes v'yatziv, and start Shmoneh Esrei. So what this practically means that those women who have been until now accustomed to only daven Shmoneh Esrei, thinking that that's the most important part, they should from now on add, before Shmoneh Esrei, Shema Baruch Shem, emes v'yatziv, and it's a little introduction. It takes another 2 minutes.
What is? Can you say briefly what emes ya'atziv actually talks about?
And we will get into each
Okay,
part.
sorry.
We will.
Self-limited, sorry.
The next, so Shmoneh Esrei is also obligatory. A woman davens Shmoneh Esrei, and that's it. She's done
For the night.
for the day. This is Shachris. Hopefully, you're not davening Shachris at night.
but yes, Shema Alamita.
Well, I'm going to get to them.
Okay,
First
okay.
mincha. That's Shachris, Mincha, Ma'ariv, Krishna. We'll get to there. Okay? So it's a very slim davening. This is the basics that every mother, every woman should try to do. Now, there is an even lesser, a lesser level or a lesser version than what I said was the basic version. And the lesser version is we pretty much already introduced last week when we discussed about Shemona Esrei, and that is that they basically, the woman doesn't daven anything other than just Birchas HaShachar and Birchas HaTorah. That's it. Now, do we condone this version? We don't condone it. The version that is promoted is the version I just told you. All those things, Emes V'Yatziv, Shemona Esrei, okay, all those things are an obligation. However, we cannot ignore, we discussed this last week, that there is a custom of a jury amongst women for many, many, many generations back. That women who were very busy would only daven, Birchas HaShachar, Birchas HaTorah, fulfill their tefillah obligation according to the Rambam, and they wouldn't daven anything else. Do they have upon whom to rely? So as we explained last week, yeah, they do. The Rambam and other poskim who dissent on the various parts I said. I mentioned a few different parts of prayer we're not obligated in saying, so in truth, some of those are subject to debate. So if it's subject to debate, that means that if women are accustomed not to say it, they were relying on the opinions who say women are not obligated in them. So bottom line is like this. Women who do follow this approach, this custom, we don't scream at them, we don't tell them, well, we shouldn't scream anyways, but we don't tell them that, that it's against halacha and you can't do that, you have to. This is a Jewish tradition that was kept for many generations. We don't promote it. We tell women who ask to do the order I said, but they have upon whom to rely. But nonetheless, it's not such a big deal. It takes, how much long, halavai, the davening should take a long time. How long does it take to say the parts I said? It's all you're doing in addition is Tamid, 2 sentences of Shema, Emes V'Yatziv, and Shemona Esrei. That's it. And you fill your basic obligation. That's the basic chiyuv. Past that, it's all voluntary. There's no chiyuv.
Concerning the times, is it better to daven shorter and daven by Zman Tefillah, or do more by Chatzos, like what's the later time?
So we touched upon this last week of where we have, do we sabotage the concentration and kavanah of tefillah for the sake of getting in the time, or do we sabotage the time for the sake of getting in the concentration? We said this was the famous debate between Chassidim versus non-Chassidim of what to do, and Chassidim usually took the approach that better to have the main aspect of tefillah, which is the kavanah, than to focus so much on the time. Better make sure that you get on the bus, even if you're going to get late, than to make sure the bus leaves on time without you. So the point is that we said this was always a debate, but I nonetheless mentioned in the class last week that this was something, in general, the directive is it should be done within Zman Tefillah. A person should do within Zman Tefillah, because what happens is that, as we see, that once people start abusing Zman Tefillah under the claim of Kavanah, Zman Tefillah totally disappears from their Shulchan Aruch. So it's something that has to be used wisely, only in a case where it's very, very much necessary. So we so far set up three levels, and the last level, which is a minhag of many women, and the Alter himself mentions this custom, which is interesting because usually whenever we have a debate in Poskim, we say follow the custom. What the minhag is, that's what sets the halacha. So if we have a machlekes Rambam and Ramban, and the custom is like the Rambam, so that's the halacha. But in this case, we find the Poskim rule like the Ramban. Even though the custom is like the Rambam, and they say the custom is like the Rambam, so it's a little interesting. It's a little, it sort of goes out of the general way of ruling that we tend to follow the custom. In this case, we're saying we don't follow the custom. So probably this is what every woman should be taught to do the parts I said. But those who don't and follow the minhag of many generations, if we protest her, we wouldn't be starting up just with her. We'd be starting up with all the foremothers and who knows how many generations. When Chiyas HaMesim comes, we're going to have to run away. We're getting a lot of enemies.
In
So.
I know, Rabbi Goldstein, I see the beauty in like saying the whole, as much as you can from the tefillah, But sometimes people get overwhelmed, and like by saying less, they could be like a better person in the morning, in a better mood, and all these kind of things. And I think that's better than being like so machmir about saying the whole. I don't know. Am I wrong?
As we said, the basic, the by a man, we never tell a man to, if he likes some, but in essence, there's no, when it comes to, let's say, after, the parts after Shemoneh Esrei, there's no real difference between a man and a woman. Aleinu is not, it's not an obligation on man or woman, it's a part of davening that we accepted, and women as well. But as I said, since women have this tradition where they would do abridged davenings, men do not have that tradition doing abridged davenings. Women do it, so therefore we give more lax, we're more lax regarding women regarding it. So yeah, it's a person's prerogative. The basics is, as I said, the parts that we mentioned. Lichatchil, the post can write a woman should daven everything. She should try to daven everything she's able to, but at the very least not to decrease from what we said. And even those who do decrease, as we said, have to rely. Let's move on to mincha. Mincha is quite simple, just Shemoneh Esrei. You want to add Asher before it? Not obligatory, but add it. It's fine. It's a nice prayer. Karbanos, you're asking? No, you don't have to do the karbanos before. Only the parashas atamid of once a day. What's more important? Right. The pashtus, I would say Ashrei, because Chazal say, sure, someone who says Tehillah David 3 times a day, Ashrei is a very important prayer. But nonetheless, they're not an obligation. None of those are obligation, just Shemoneh Esrei. So you go straight to Shemoneh Esrei, nothing before, nothing after. That's the basic, slimmed version of Mincha. Ma'ariv. So Ma'ariv is a little tricky. Ma'ariv Shemoneh Esrei, according to all opinions, women are not obligated in. For the very simple reason that neither are men. No one's obligated in Ma'ariv Shemoneh Esrei. Ma'ariv was instituted as a voluntary prayer, corresponding to the karbanis. When the sages established davening, they did it keneged tmidin. They established it corresponding to the karbanis that were brought in the temple, in temple times, which were the morning tamid, shachris, the afternoon offering, mincha, and what was ma'ariv? There was no evening offering. You weren't allowed to offer karbanis at night. It's forbidden. Avodah is only kosher during the daytime. However, the leftover meat was offered. Any carbon that was already shechted during the day could be offered throughout the night. So Ma'ariv is corresponding to those Eivarim, those limbs that didn't yet have time to be brought onto the altar. So it's Rishus, it's voluntary. Nonetheless, men accept it as an obligation. Therefore, for men it's an obligation. A woman never did, and that's agreed upon by all. And thereby, a woman by no means has to daven Ma'ariv Shemoneh Esrei. Can she? Yeah, sure she can. She can do whatever she wants. She can daven. That's not a problem. But she's not obligated to do so.
So these
What
women.
about the obligation of a man to require Yitzhak Mitzrayim?
Ooh. So that's what I'm about to reach right now. So all that only takes care of the Shemoneh Esrei part of davening. But as we've been mentioning a few times, davening is made up of a few different mitzvahs. So I understand Shemoneh Esrei and Chayiv, but what about Shema? So Shema also women are in Chayivin, as we're going to go through in the dissection, so that's not a problem. They don't have to say that either. And even though I said by the morning Shachris, women should say Shema and Baruch Shem, that is only once a day. There's no need for her to do that twice a day. So she doesn't have to do it. She doesn't say it at night.
Whoa.
No.
Wait. However, some poskim rule that a woman is obligated to say Emes ve'emunah, the blessing that comes after Shema. Meaning, according to some opinions, Ma'ariv Shemoneh Esrei obligation for a woman is just the blessing of Emes ve'emunah. That's it. She says just that blessing, nothing before, nothing after, not even Shemoneh Esrei. When we go through the dissection, we will see that this is not the mainstream approach. This is not what is done mainstream. Either a woman chooses to daven Ma'ariv or doesn't daven at all. We'll go into all that, the reasons why. But so bottom line is, let's put it like this: that what the common approach is that Ma'ariv there's nothing obligatory at all. She doesn't daven anything of Ma'ariv. And those who hold there is obligation present, that's specifically by the bracha of Emes ve'emunah, and that would just be to say that blessing alone. Krishma Shalamita is upon women to say as well, as the Gemara says, do women not need to be guarded? Only men have demons, not women.
Oh, that's good to know.
Only men have spirits and bad dreams, not women. Women also need protection at night. So therefore, there's no difference in men and women when it comes to Krishma Shalamita. They both say it. And when you say Krishma Shalamita, so that's actually, some opinions say, that's where you fulfill your mitzvah Yitzich Yetzias Mitzrayim, and that's where you don't have to do it by Meir, as we will go through. Let's just cover quickly before I begin dissecting inside regarding Hallel and Musaf. So in the day of Rosh Chodesh, women are never obligated in Hallel. So it's not part of our obligatory prayer list. It's Rishus, okay? It's voluntary. Meaning that lichatchila you should say Hallel just like you lichatchila daven all of davening. But a woman who needs to do the slim diversion, he's on a davening diet, as her kids prescribed for her, and therefore Hallel would also be part of those sections that is not said. Regarding Musaf, so there's a machlekes if women are obligated in Musaf. Those who don't daven it have upon whom to rely. But the best thing is for a woman to daven Musaf as part of her obligatory list. So if she asks, I only do the obligatory list because I'm very busy and I have lots of children and it's too much for me. So I do only the basic obligation. Do I have to daven Musaf? We tell her the best thing is for you to try to add it to your list, and that is daven before the 7th hour of the day.
So they should daven Musaf.
Musaf should be daven. Those who don't have upon whom to rely, but the best thing is daven Musaf. Even though Hallel we said no, but Musaf should be davened.
I thought Hallel was more important.
Nope, women are exempt from Hallel. Okay, so now we're going to go through each part and give a little background, explanation, other approaches, and what's going on here. So let's begin with Shemini. We're not going to go in the order of davening, or should we? Maybe we should go in the order of davening. Okay, let's do it in the order of davening. Let's start with Birchas HaShachar. So we said that Birchas HaShachar is part of the obligation list. So it's interesting because the Shulchan Aruch, we in our course of Birchas HaShachar, we actually went through this and we explained it in the Shulchan Aruch. It doesn't differentiate. It doesn't say one or the other about men versus women. It just says, say the blessings in the morning. Now, seemingly we should say that just like men are obligated to praise God for these benefits, so to women. On the other hand, there's an argument to say that, hey, these are Zman Grama, you can only say them during the daytime, according to many approaches, and that's the halacha. If it's already nighttime, we don't say Birchas HaShachar anymore, and therefore it's considered time-dependent. And if it's time-dependent, women should be exempt. The Mishnah Berurah deals with this question in chapter 70 in the Shulchan Aruch, and he concludes that, bottom line, in his opinion, women are obligated in Birchas HaShachar. And so can be proven from the fact that the Shulchan Aruch discusses what bracha should women say instead of Shas Lo Yasani Isha. Now, if women were not obligated, why are you discussing what blessing they should say? Obviously, they are. And that's the bottom line halacha. Women are obligated in Birchas HaShachar, just like a man, to say all the blessings every morning. As we mentioned earlier in the previous classes, by saying the bracha of a Mavir Sheina and then the Hiratzein, a woman fulfills the Rambam obligation of daily prayer. So those who follow the Rambam and are doing the most abridged version of davening, which is basically not davening anything, they at very least have to do Birchas HaShachar every single day to fulfill that biblical obligation of daily prayer, which is accomplished in that paragraph. Another offshoot discussion on the obligation of women is something we mentioned in one of our previous classes, and I have more information on that now, and that's regarding the 100 blessings. One of the reasons why the sages obligated or instituted Birchas HaShachar, as is written in the beginning of chapter 46, an introduction to Birchas HaShachar, is to fulfill or accumulate 100 blessings per day. Birchas HaShachar takes up about 19 of them. So, if women are obligated to say 100 blessings, then they obviously too would be obligated in Birchas HaShachar. But if they're exempt from saying the 100 blessings, then seemingly they shouldn't be obligated in Birchas HaShachar. So regarding this matter, we find a machlekes in the Poskim. Some Poskim say that women are obligated in 100 blessings a day, and other Poskim say they are not. And bottom line is that the leaning approach is that women are obligated, and therefore they should endeavor to recite 100 blessings a day.
Can it be on
In a Sikha of the Rebbe mentioned that it's the custom of women to do 100 blessings a day, just like a man. And even children we try to educate to do 100 blessings a day. Now, if a woman is not davening 3 times a day, this is kind of hard to get.
She can say it on food, the bathroom, all those things. No?
She's going to have to eat a lot of food, and instead of dieting her davening, she's going to have to diet her food. So it's better to do the opposite.
Okay.
Get fat baruchnias, eat a lot of ruchnias.
Yeah.
You have to eat a lot of food to get 100 blessings. You're losing in Shemoneh Esrei about 60 blessings if you don't daven Shemoneh Esrei, Shachar, Mincha, Ma'ariv. Yeah. Wow. So that's, what are you going to do? You're going to eat 60 in 60 intervals? You're going to eat food during the day?
So 2 Shemoneh Esreis, you already got 120.
No. Every Shemoneh Esrei is 20. It's 19.
Oh, so okay.
19.
Someone
So-
suggested that you can eat something, go out of the room, close the door, come back.
No. It's an Isser. There are Rabbanan, according to some deraisa of bracha shenetzricha, to cause an extra bracha when unnecessary. Now, getting an extra blessing of 100 blessings is not considered necessary in this regard. Only on Shabbos, where there's difficulty, do we give a little. There's a discussion there. We give a little bit of a heter that you can, to you 100 blessings, you can eat food before the meal, so you get an extra bracha. So let's say I see in front of me, a piece of fish. I get a shahakol in now because if I ate it during the meal, it would be exempt with the meal. But that's a special case example that we allow it. But in general, we do not allow someone to purposely cause himself to say another bracha.
And you mentioned the Rebbe said also in the Sikha that women should say Mea Brachot.
He didn't say women should. He just said, and the custom of generations of women is to be careful to say 100 blessings a day. Of generations, even the custom,
It just doesn't seem to make sense, because if a woman has this abbreviated davening because she's so busy
Right.
with whatever her kids, and she's gonna have time to think about, keep track.
So there's an app. I believe there's an app called the 100 Blessings app. Yeah.
Yeah, there is an app like that.
Are you saying generations before, how did they do it? They didn't need apps. How did they manage everything in life that we don't manage today without our phone? We're a different generation. People back in the day used to manage without phones.
But does women daven
They used to survive.
So, I'll be honest with you. When I did this daily halacha, I got asked a lot of questions on this, and I'm like, listen, I'm just the orator. I don't understand it either. I don't understand the list of how, especially with children, how do children accumulate if they're not yet of age to daven Shemoneh Esrei? Like, how do they get? You have to really give them. Maybe that's a minig Yisrael to give them a lot of bamba, to give them a lot of things to eat. And also they can say brachas when they're not obligated, so by them it's not a problem. In any event, but it's just a nice thing to know, to try to get. But the main thing that we're talking about this in is regarding Birchas HaShachar, that one should endeavor to recite Birchas HaShachar. Certainly one is obligated to recite Birchas HaShachar to fulfill the Mea blessings, 100 blessings according to this approach. Birchas HaTorah, we discussed in our course already, women are absolutely obligated in. This is not up for debate or discussion. This is actually one of the only parts of the entire davening that finally we are all in agreement. Everyone agrees women are obligated to say Birchas HaTorah. As even though women aren't obligated in Talmud Torah, women are obligated to learn Torah in those sections of halacha that they must know, that they must follow, so therefore they're obligated in Birchas HaTorah. We already mentioned if you didn't say Birchas HaTorah during the day, you can still say it at night. It's not a problem. You just have to make sure to say it before Ma'ariv. And if you daven Shachris, you can't say it anymore because Shachris fulfills the obligation of Birchas HaTorah. So you only say Birchas HaTorah if you haven't davened that day yet. When we say daven, I mean Shema. Birchas Shema and Shema. We usually never say it at night, but in a case where a person didn't daven anything, okay, didn't say Birchas HaShachar, didn't say Birchas HaTorah, didn't daven Shema of Shachris, and then Daven Ma'ariv, and now they want to learn something, they have to say Birchas Torah.
Okay, I understand.
We said this in our in previous classes, that if you're doing a shir with women, or men doing shir with men, and even if it's at night, they should say Birchas Torah for all those who haven't yet said it. Okay, so our next stop of the obligatory parts of davening is, we said Parshas HaTamid. So it's as follows. The Parshas HaTamid is corresponding to the rabbinical enactment of prayer, that prayer corresponds to the Tamid sacrifice. So therefore we read the Parshas HaTamid as if we're bringing the Tamid sacrifice. Now, since also women were obligated to partake of the Tamid, men and women, it was a machlekes who wanted to give machzis shekel, but nonetheless consider that all Klal Yisrael had a portion in the Tamid, so too they're obligated to say the Tamid. Now the truth is that this is dependent on the debate of Shemona Esrei. According to those who hold women are chayiv in Shemona Esrei, they're also chayiv in the Tamid. Those who say they're not, and they're not chayiv in the Tamid. But since we rule the main opinion follows that they are chayiv in Shemona Esrei, as we'll get to again soon, so therefore they're also chayiv in the Tamid, and that's why we said earlier that as part of our obligation list that a woman must say that paragraph of Parshas HaTamid. The rest of Karbanis is a nice thing. It's a beautiful thing. We're going to go through it later. After Pesach, we're going to go through all the different parts of davening and the importance of saying them and why we say them. Adon Olam, Ketores, Akedah, if we should say Parshas Haman. But again, they're not part of our obligation list for the person on the diet. And therefore, we are not going to discuss it now. Let's go straight to Psukei de Zimra. Psukei de Zimra, if you notice, we had a huge gap that we skipped. We went from Parshas HaTamid all the way to Shema. Where did that all go? So it's as follows. Psukei de Zimra, it's not brought in Poskim before the Alter Rebbe what to do about it. It doesn't say. Meaning even those who discuss, and the Rishonim discuss, a woman's obligation vis-a-vis Shemona Esrei and Shema, do not discuss what's the deal with Psukei de Zimra. The Alter Rebbe is the first of the Poskim to relate to it, and he writes the following. It is permitted for women to say Psukei de Zimra if they wish. Harashus beyadam. We are not going to prohibit you from saying Psukei de Zimra, correct? It's permitted to say Psukei de Zimra, clearly implying it is not of obligatory status. And why? So the reason is as follows. The Alter Rebbe seemingly learns that according to the Ramban, who we rule that obligates women in davening Shemona Esrei, the Chachamim only obligated them in actual Shemona Esrei, because that's the main part of davening, that is the request of mercy from God. However, all the other stuff, the introduction, the prep talks, they didn't obligate women in. And we don't have a precedent to require women to say it. And therefore, in the Alter Rebbe's opinion, it is viewed as a davar reshus. And while he says, we're not going to say, oh, well, since you're not obligated, so how can you say a bracha levatalav baruch she'amar and yishtabach? You're not obligated. We're not going to go like that approach, because as I already said, women are allowed to do mitzvahs that they are exempt from. However, according to the Alter Rebbe, it's only voluntary. We have two more. Davar just means voluntary.
Voluntary, okay.
We have two more opinions. This is the Alter Rebbe's opinion. And that's why the list I gave you follows the Alter Rebbe. We have two more approaches. The approach of Sfardim who follow Rav Yosef. He goes a step further and he says, no. It's forbidden for women to say Baruch Shama and Yishtabach. Forbidden. If they want to say the Tehillim is Mayim, you want to say Yichvoid, Ashrei, you can say Tehillim all day. We have no problem. You can read that. You can read the whole Tehillim. No one's going to say anything to you. But to say Psukei de Zimra with the sandwich of brachas of Baruch Shama and Yishtabach, a bracha levatala. As we said, we discussed this in length last week and in previous classes, that all brachas that women are exempt from, the Mechaber rules women are not allowed to say. And the Rav holds that there's no difference. Even the Mechaber doesn't say it about Baruch Shem and Yishtabach. He understands, as he writes in your Bia Omer in length in his rulings, brings many proofs, in his opinion, that women are not allowed to say it if they follow the Sephardi psak of the Mechaber. So there are many Sephardi women who we mentioned this already, who purposely do not say, even if they want to follow the best of the best. Mahadrin mina mahadrin. They have no one bothering them at home. They have all the time on the world. They can daven a 3-hour shachris, halavai, and the men. They will still not say Baruch Shamar and Yishtabach, because they hold it's asur. As we already said, the minhag of the Sephardic jury of women, as well as the majority of the poskim, do not agree with this approach and hold that just like men, they are just like Ashkenazi women and can say if they want these blessings. So each Sephardic woman is to follow her posik, her minhag, and that's it. To note, let me just make a note of it that, as I've heard from Yaakov Yosef many times, that Ravad Yosef's own wife did not listen to her husband in his psakim. She did her own minhagim. Meaning his mother. He said it about his mother, that many of the novel rulings of Ravad Yosef to beat back against the accepted Sephardic or Iraqi or Syrian Sephardi minhagim, which a lot of them have to do with brachas, which he was more machmir and that shouldn't be done. His wife always did. She said, I am not starting up with my family, and you shouldn't start up with my family. We're doing the customs as they always were. So it was more to, it's a funny situation.
That's not okay now, is it?
What?
You're supposed to follow what your husband follows, right?
No, but she says that you're supposed to follow what your father follows. She says you're changing the custom. No, we find this, the Yaivitz writes regarding a different issue about Brach of Shechianu. He received the old tshuva regarding a certain couple, Yaakov Emden, 300 years ago, that the husband, well, he's writing also about himself. The husband basically was protesting his wife from saying Shechianu upon lighting Yantav candles. He says there's no source for this. Shechianu is only said by Kiddush, and he's right. There is absolutely zero source for saying Shechianu by candle lighting. One has nothing to do with the other. Shechianu belongs to Kiddush. So he's protesting his wife. So he writes in his tshuva, he says, you're right, and he proves that it's true, but he says, what can I do? My wife also does it, and after I protested one time, I learned my lesson. I don't open my mouth anymore. So he says, just leave him, let him be. It's not worth the battle. Pick bigger and better battles. So too, he says of his mother, Ravad Yosef's wife, that she did what was kept in Mama's home in Syria. That's how she followed. And whatever she let her husband paskin, that was for the base medrash only, not to be practiced at home.
So a quick question.
Yeah.
Is Baruch Shemar and Yishtabach considered two brachas?
Absolutely.
Oh, no.
Yes. It's two
One
brachas.
starts and one finishes, but it's still considered.
It's two brachas, yeah, and that would be 2 out of the 100. Yes. Yes. We have a third opinion. So far we said the opinion of the Alter Rebbe, which is you're allowed to, you don't have to. The opinion of Ravad Yosef, which if you're Sephardi, you're not allowed to. And the third opinion is that of the Mishnah Berurah and Rabbi Akiva Eiger. The Mishnah Berurah, Rabbi Akiva Eiger, and a few other achronim who hold of this approach. Psukei de Zimra is an absolute obligation upon women. That includes Baruch Shamar and Yishtabach. So if someone who follows the rulings of the Mishnah Berurah, not the Alter Rebbe, asks us what's the diet list of davening, I would have to include for them the whole Psukei de Zimra. Which is funny because Dafka Chassidim emphasize more about davening, and here we get a slimmer version. That's how it is. Sometimes you find these switches in Halacha. So he holds the following. Rabbi Akiva Eiger holds, and Mishnah Berurah Paskins like him, that he goes into, well, if we want to dissect every part of davening and figure out are women obligated in or not, we have to understand why it was established. And he says, Psukei de Zimra was established as an introductory prep prayer for Shemoneh Esrei. So you talk to the king, you praise the king before just going in the room and say, hey, God, give me this, give me that. First talk to him, say, hello, how are you? Thank you very much for A, thank you very much for B. And by the way, it would be very nice if you can spare me some health, spare me some parnasa. But to just rush into the room, God, it's A, B, C, D, E, thanks a lot. So Rabbi Akiva Eiger says, even women, if they're obligated in Rachamim Shemoneh Esrei, as we rule like the Ramban, then they're obligated also in the prep talk. One doesn't work without the other. There's no shortcut. So he says women have to say Psukei de Zimra. The Alter Rebbe obviously doesn't take that view. He views that they're independent of each other. So I guess the Alter Rebbe holds is an advisor to the God. This is a Jewish mother. She's very busy with children. Doesn't have time for all the. She needs the ikr. And in any event, so these are the three approaches regarding Pesukei de Zimra, and everyone is to follow their paisik that they hold by. One more aspect in Pesukei de Zimra. Being that even if we hold a Rebbe Kiva Eger, and especially if we only hold like the Alter Rebbe, there's no need for a woman to say the entire Pesukei de Zimra in a time of need. Meaning, if we're discussing here the slimmed davening, only obligation, then she can say Baruch Sha'amar, Ashrei, and straight to Yishtabach. Even according to the Mishnah Berurah, she's good. So it wouldn't actually include the entire Pesukei de Zimra from the obligatory status, as even a man in a time of need is allowed to slim down, trim down his Pesukei de Zimra to make it with the minyan, or to make Zman Tefillah. Zman Tefillah.
Did I miss something?
What I said is that a woman is not obligated according to the Alter Rebbe.
The Alter Rebbe, okay.
And according to Mishnah Berurah, she's obligated Pesukei de Zimra. But even according to the Alter Rebbe, a woman can't do whatever she wants. You can't say, okay, I'll say just Baruch Sha'amar, and then I'll go straight to Shema. You can't. Baruch Sha'amar is a sandwich. You need to have something in the middle.
Okay.
So it's like eating a plain piece of bread. You have bread, you need to have the food in the middle, and then you have another slice.
Right.
Okay? So Baruch Sha'amar, Ashrei, Yishtabach. So even according to the Alter Rebbe, who says it's reshus, who says it's voluntary, that doesn't mean it's a free-for-all. It just means you can choose not to do any of it, or you can choose to do it and do the minimum, which is Baruch Sha'amar, Ashrei, and Yishtabach. And even according to the Mishnah Berurah, that would be okay. As I said, by Chassidim, we are accustomed to never skip in davening. We always say all the mizmorim. We never skip even for the sake of a minyan or the sake of Zman Tefillah. But nonetheless, certainly a woman would be allowed to do so if she needs to follow the slimmed version of davening due to time and pressure reasons, even according to Mishnah Berurah. Shema. So our clearest source that we have so far from everything we've just discussed is Shema. There is a clear Mishnah. The first source of Torah Sheba'al Peh is the Mishnah. We have a clear Mishnah in Maseches Brachos, chapter 2, that women are exempt from reading the Shema and from the mitzvah of Tefillin. It's listing here a whole bunch of things, and one of the things is that women are exempt from the mitzvah of Shema.
Or the other one?
This is talking about Shema of the morning and evening.
In the morning,
Okay, there's a positive command in the Torah, right? God commanded us in the Torah to say the Shema prayer in the morning when we wake up and in the evening when we go to sleep. So that is a positive command, one of the 248. Are women obligated? The Mishnah says they are not obligated, and that is undebatable. No one says that women are obligated. Okay? Everyone agrees women are exempt from the Shema. However, you knew that was coming. It is proper, as conclude the Poskim, the Mechaber, the Ramah, the Alter Rebbe, this is undebatable. It is proper for them to say the first pasuk of Shema Yisrael and Baruch Shem to accept the yoke of heaven upon themselves. So that's why I said before, even though I put this in the obligation list, in truth, it's just a proper obligation. It's not an actual obligation, but it's so short and so beautiful that we put it in there. Okay, so this is just for the sake of Kabbalah Sol Malchus Shamayim. It does not have to be done within Zman Tefillah, within Zman Kriya Shema. Women don't have that pressure of Zman because, again, they're not chayiv in this mitzvah. But if they do want to fulfill the mitzvah deraisa of Shema, let's not forget, we keep on emphasizing, although women are exempt from the positive commands, they can choose to fulfill them. So do we say, oh, well, women are exempt from Shema? No one argues on that, so they should and can say Shema whenever they want. If they want to get the advantage of fulfilling the positive command of Shema, even though they are exempt, it must be done within the time that a man is obligated. So that means until Seif Zman Kriya Shema. So the ideal time for davening Shachris for a woman, if she wants to get the best of the best out of the mitzvahs, out of the readings that she is doing, is before the end of the time of Kriya Shema, which nowadays, according to the Alter Rebbe's man, is about 8:50.
I understood that. Like, by
So we keep on making it earlier, if you notice. It keeps on getting earlier. It went from Chatzos to the 4th hour of the day, an hour earlier. Then soon we're going to jump to sunrise. That's the best of the best.
Are we still protected by saying Baruch Shem and then, saying Shema Yisrael and then Baruch Shem without saying everything? Because I heard it's a big protection to say it at night. I know you did say it.
Oh, I already said at night, women should say just like men because they need protection as well. Shema of the day and evening, Ma'ariv, has nothing to do with protection. It has to do with fulfilling God's will and command. Kriya Shema Shalamit is for protection purposes, correct?
Protection.
Yes. And that woman needs just like men, so that's a woman should say Kriya Shema.
Okay.
Now, what about Birchas Kriya Shema? So Birchas Kriya Shema falls into the same exact status as Shema. If women are exempt from Shema, certainly they're exempt from the sandwich of Shema, which is the brachas. The brachas said before and after Shema are the introduction and post-Shema prayers. So if you're not obligated in the main focus of the brachas, certainly not obligated in the brachas, and that's clear, that's undebatable. Nobody holds a woman is obligated in Birchas Shema as a result of Shema. So therefore, the first two blessings of Yetzer and Avas Olam that come prior to Shema are not part of our obligation list. A woman does not have to say them. They are, once again, merely voluntary, reshus. And so writes the Alter Rebbe as well. When he lists Psukei de Zimra, also listed is this are the brachas of Shema. Where are we? Kuf Aleph. Oh. Yes, okay, so just it's the same idea as, so that would follow the same three. I'm going to get to that soon, okay? Right now, so I emphasize the first two brachas, okay? So, if I remember correctly, the Mishnah Berurah and Rabbi Akiva are on agreement here. They're not obligated in Birchas Shema because that's not a preparatory for Shemona Esrei. It's a preparatory for Shema, and everyone agrees they're not obligated in Shema. So that's clear. So Birchas Kriya Shema is not an obligation at all, according to any opinion. Meaning the first two blessings by Ma'ariv and Shacharis, not an obligation at all. And according to Ravad Yosef's version of understanding the ruling for Sfardim, they are not allowed to say it. So if Sfardi woman who's davening a 3-hour Shachar, she has all the time in the world, will skip Baruch She'amar, will skip Yishtabach, and will skip the brachas of Yetzer and Avas Olam. So she has a mandatory diet. We're done Shema, we now reach the after blessings of Shema. So if you didn't have to say the before blessings, certainly you don't have to say the after blessings. However, here we come to something interesting. We mentioned in our list in last class the 7 mitzvahs fulfilled during davening, independent of each other. Now, one of the mitzvahs accomplished and fulfilled in Shema and Birchas Kriya Shema is the mitzvah deraisa of remembering the Exodus on a daily basis. The Torah commands, just like we have a mitzvah deraisa on the night of Pesach, the Saper, the Yitzias Mitzrayim, the mitzvah Veigat Levincha, so too we have an obligation of remembering the Exodus daily. And the question is asked, are women obligated in this mitzvah as well? And we have a major debate in the Poskim. One of the great Poskim who discussed this halacha was the Shagas Aryeh, whose name was Aryeh Green. No, I forgot the last name. He lived in the 1700s. He was a goyin of incomparable measureship. He went through the Shas, they say, 600 times. And he wrote a very, very deep sefer on halacha, which is called Shagas Aryeh, maybe Greenfeld. I think his name was Greenfeld. And in fact, when the Rebbe told Chassidim that they should be baki in the Lamdish Sfarim, he specifically mentioned such as the Shagas Aryeh and the Minchas Chinuch. So this is one of the two Sfarim of Lamdis that the Rebbe mentions that Chassidim should learn. And the Rebbe himself was a tremendous baki, I mean, as in addition to his Bekiyas and all Sfarim, but a tremendous baki specifically in these Sfarim, the Shagas Aryeh and the Minchas Chinuch. So there he has this whole discussion regarding the mitzvah of remembering the Exodus daily, and is it incumbent upon women? And he says, no, women are exempt. Why? Very simple. The mitzvah of remembering the Exodus is a dual command, day and night. We read it every year in the Haggadah. We read about how Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah, I didn't merit to say the Exodus at night until came along Ben Zayman and taught me, Rabbi Saleiles. So we see there's a mitzvah by day and a mitzvah by night. Now day and night are times. So if we have one mitzvah during daytime, one mitzvah during night, and this is Kriya Shema, which women are exempt because it's a time-dependent command. So just like women are exempt from Kriya Shema, women are exempt from the Exodus remembrance. That's how he learns. And that's how some poskim rule. According to this approach, there's no reason to obligate women to say Emes V'Yatziv. They are exempt from it. However, other poskim argue and rule women are biblically obligated to recite, to remember the Exodus daily, by day and by night. Now, what do we do with the claim of the Shagas Aryeh? What he said sounds, it's a tough question, what he has brought to us. If you want to make them obligated in Siyas Mitzrayim, make them obligated in Krishma as well. What's the difference? They both have an obligation of day and night, and we're saying it's time dependent. So why by this no and this yes? The answer is that these poskim learn that the mitzvah of Zechiras Yetzias Mitzrayim of a daily basis is not really a day and night mitzvah. It's a single mitzvah that's fulfilled part at day and part at night, but it's one mitzvah. It's not like Shema where they're both separate mitzvahs. This is a single mitzvah, and therefore it's not considered time-dependent because it's 24/7. It's always. There's never a time you're not chayiv in the Yetzias Mitzrayim. Unlike Shema, that the day has the day obligation, night is the night obligation. So bottom line is this is a very subtle distinction, but no matter whether we understand or not, this is a debate in the poskim, and the Alter Rebbe voiced a very clear opinion on this debate, and his opinion is women are obligated in Mitzrayim min Torah by day and by night, and so rule majority of the poskim, including the Mishnah Brura. According to this, the Alter Rebbe writes, women are obligated min Torah to say the bracha of Emes V'Yatziv. Now, the truth is that the biblical obligation is fulfilled any time a woman remembers Yetzias Mitzrayim. So if she said the parsha of Vayomer, and remembered Yetzias Mitzrayim, or said Haidu and mentioned Yetzias Mitzrayim there, or said Az Yashir, she already fulfilled her biblical obligation because she mentioned it. And the mitzvah, the biblical command is fulfilled no matter in what language or wording one remembers. Nonetheless, what the Alter Rebbe and all these other poskim hold is that since women are biblically obligated, therefore when the Chachamim established the bracha of Emes V'Yatziv for Yetzias Mitzrayim, since women are obligated in the biblical mitzvah, they are also obligated in the rabbinical form of fulfilling this mitzvah. Bottom line is that according to majority of poskim, women are obligated to say the bracha of Emes V'Yatziv, and certainly biblically obligated to remember Yetzias Mitzrayim once a day and daytime, and once a night during nighttime. So by Shachris, it's clear, so we included Emes V'Yatziv as part of our list of obligations, and if you think about it, if we follow this approach that it's not a biblical obligation, it is in fact the most important part of davening from a mitzvah standpoint. As everything else, why do they daven Shemoneh Esrei? We're going to get to soon because of the Ramban. That's rabbinical. Sukkah de Zimra, Shema, it's only proper. Tamid is only due to Shemoneh Esrei. Birchas Kriya Shema, a brachas in the morning, only rabbinical. This is biblical. Bottom line is, Emes V'Yatziv is very important. It's an absolute obligation for women to say. Those women who we said before who are accustomed not to daven, They relied on the opinion of the Shagas Aryeh. As we said, there was a approach that wasn't the directive for the public, that wasn't the condoned approach that women would do. Okay, so that's relying on the dissenting opinions. But when we say what should be the minimum list, it has to include emes v'yatziv. That is the din. Now, what about ma'ariv? We said at night as well women are obligated. There's no difference. So interestingly, the Alter Rebbe, when he writes of the obligation and that women must say emes v'yatziv, he doesn't speak about ma'ariv. The first pasuk who mentions about ma'ariv is the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah writes that just as they are obligated to say emes v'yatziv, they are obligated to say emes v'emunah at night. So even though you don't have to say Shema, you don't have to daven ma'ariv, you don't say Shemona Esrei, the bracha of emes v'emunah a woman has to say. That is the approach of the Mishnah Berurah, and that is how some Rabbanim will direct you to do.
Right after Shema.
No problem. No, it's important to know what we're talking about. Okay, so a lot of women, because of this, part of their obligatory prayers is emes v'emunah at night. And once they're doing, they just do the whole thing. They just do the whole ma'ariv, the whole job. Because it feels kind of strange just to pick out one paragraph. They just do everything. And they're not doing it because it's a nice thing. They're doing it because they hold as an obligation of Zecher Yetzias Mitzrayim of every single night. Bottom line is that being that the Alter Rebbe and other Pesachim do not add the bracha of emes v'emunah, and so too, let's be honest with each other. If women are really obligated to say this bracha, why did no one tell us that very important piece of information? When you're writing in chapter 106 what women are obligated in, and you write, oh, a ma'ariv women don't have to daven, let us know. We're referring to only Shemona Esrei, but emes v'emunah, of course they have to say it's Minat Torah. When you write unequivocally, oh, the ma'ariv they don't do, it's very misleading. So we must say it's not misleading at all. Indeed, women don't have to say it. Why? So let's explain. Meaning, this is unlike the Mishnah Berurah. We said already before that biblically a woman really fulfills her obligation even if she remembers Yetzias Mitzrayim on her own, without davening, without emes v'yatziv. It's just that since she's biblically obligated, the Chachamim established the bracha of emes v'yatziv also for them, so they have to say it. Over at night, since women don't daven ma'ariv, perhaps the Chachamim did not feel right to establish this bracha also upon women. Shachris, which they daven, according to the Ramban, it's an obligation, so just do the paragraph before. But here, where there's no obligation of davening Shemona Esrei of ma'ariv, so the Chachamim didn't feel to establish this bracha for women, and bottom line is that the main minhag is that women do not have to daven ma'ariv, not even emes v'emunah, and they can be Yotzei Zecher Yetzias Mitzrayim and Kriya Shema Shalamita. When they say the 3 paragraphs of Shema, the paragraph of Vayomer mentions the Exodus, and that's how they fulfill it. But is it a good thing for a woman to also daven ma'ariv? At the very least, this bracha? Absolutely. It's definitely a good thing. But to put it as part of our obligation list, for those who follow the Alter Rebbe, is not so simple, but definitely for those who follow the Mishnah Berurah, it is. He holds an obligation that they have to say it.
Emes v'emunah is only 1 paragraph, right?
It is, a long paragraph.
Yeah.
It's one blessing.
Ve'amru kulam is the end of it, right?
No.
No?
Baruch Atah Hashem Gal Yisrael. Hashkiveinu. It ends by the word
Okay.
Hashkiveinu.
Got it.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, regarding Tachanon, so the age-old custom that has been done by women is to skip Tachanon, to not say Tachanon, and that may be followed. Women who don't want to say tachanun, that's fine. Many women today do say it. From one time when I took a survey, there were some in the seminaries, it's always half the class says it, half the class doesn't say. Unfortunately, probably most of Judaism is that way. When you ask everyone has a different opinion, different approach. But regarding tachanun, at least, there's no source to obligate or exempt women from it, and therefore, what is recorded is that the minhag, widespread custom, is not to say it amongst women, and therefore they don't have to say it. They want to, they could. There's no problem. But we wouldn't put, it's not part of our obligation list and not even part of our lichatchila list. Many lichatchila skip it. I skipped Shemini Esrei. How did that happen? Went straight to Tachanun. Okay, so Shemini Esrei we covered last class. Let's just summarize the point. Again, we mentioned that Shemini Esrei is a major debate between the Rambam and the Ramban, if it's of obligatory status or not for women, because according to the Rambam, they only have to daven the biblical prayer, which is praying to God in their own words, which is fulfilled in Birchas HaShachar. According to the Ramban, no, they have to actually daven the set prayers of Shemini Esrei that the sages established, and we rule like the Ramban, and that's why Shemini Esrei was part of the obligatory prayers of the obligatory list. However, those who don't daven Shemini Esrei, they have upon whom to rely, which is the Rambam. Okay, that's the end of this discussion. This concludes a woman's davening obligation. Mirz Hashem, when we recontinue this after Purim Pesach, we will go into, from the beginning of davening, why we say the different parts of davening. Why we, Parshas Akedah, the section of Parshas Haman, which some people say, or why we don't say it, the Ketores, etc., etc. So we're going to go into this. For the remaining 20 minutes, we'll begin with this Purim. Purim, yeah.
Purim.
Women are obligated in Purim. There's no abridged version.
We all have to stomp out Amalek.
It's a great book for anyone who doesn't have. Okay, so I'll begin with one of my favorite midrashim. There's a lot of favorite ones. We wouldn't have time to go through all of them. But I'll choose one of my favorite ones, which goes really well with the Hamantash, which I believe we have here.
Yeah.
So there's a number of midrashim taken from many different sources on the Megillah, on the Purim story. We have, of course, the classical first source, the Talmud, Maseches Megillah, which goes through a lot of information. We then, of course, also have the Medrash Rabbah, the Yalkut Shemini, and we have a few more scarce midrashim that have been recently discovered over the last 50, 100 years, some being manuscripts from Yemen, some being from the Kahir Geniza that was discovered in the early 1900s by Solomon Schechter, and others. And these midrashim give a lot of light to a lot of interesting information regarding the Purim story. There's two, what I wanted to bring up here is regarding the pasuk says in Megillah Esther, that after Achashverosh and Haman had decided to destroy the Jewish people on the 13th of Adar, so they sent out a letter to the governors of all the nations on the 13th of Nisan, right? For everyone, all the Jews to be killed on the 13th of Adar. And what was written in that letter? I always wondered, what did they actually write? Like, how did it go? Right? It would be pretty cool if someone had a copy of the letter, and we could actually read what was written in Haman's letter. So we don't have a Persian copy that I know of. We do have, just for information, chronicles in Persian history of the story of Purim. The story of Purim is not just a Jewish version story. The Persians, the Iranians, have their own similar version, but their own, they have the Purim story as well, written by them. And interestingly, I discovered recently that the story of Yosef in Mitzrayim and the Exodus is also recorded in historic writings of Egypt, their own independent historic writings. So we do have, however, in the Medrash, two different Midrashim who did not see each other, the Medrash Rabbi and Yaakov Shemaini, who record what was written in this letter that Haman sent to the entire world for the sake of destroying the Jewish people. So he writes the following. Shalom Aleichem. This is, of course, a translation from whatever language he used to write it. It was probably written in 127 languages per country, right? So, but this is the Hebrew version of the translated letter. So he says, Shalom Aleichem, peace unto you. You all know that there is a certain man amongst us from the seed of kingship, the descendant of Amalek. And he is one of the Gedolei Adar. They called Haman the Gadol Adar. His name is Haman, and he has sat with us and told us about this nation, a lowly nation, who sits in our midst. They appear like madmen, who strive for evil to befall us. They are very ungrateful. Listen, Paro hosted them in his land and fed them during times of famine, and you know what they did? They repaid him with evil by cunningly telling him this story that they need to leave the land for 3 days for a sacrificial holiday for their God, and then they said they need to borrow all their gold and silver, and they never returned. They ran off. They had this prophet called Moshe, who would whisper into his staff, and he caused the sea to split. Poor Paro and the Egyptians naively went through to only be drowned. Furthermore, my personal ancestor Amalek then came to fight the vengeance of Paro and to battle against the Jews, and this cruel Moshe sent his cruel student Yeshua to attack them, and Moshe whispered some words into his staff, and many of my ancestors died. And they did the same thing to each nation in Canaan. Then came along this King David, who fought against all the kingdoms, and his son who built this house, in which they would enter and perform these strange and unknown ceremonies. This ended when Nebuchadnezzar came and destroyed them and their house and exiled them to our countries. Nevertheless, they still did not change their putrid ways, which scoff at us and our deities. We are an abomination in their eyes, and they don't marry into us. There are many more matters that they do which are so evil that they can't even be written. So we have made a lottery to destroy them on the 13th of Adar. And when you receive this letter, please make sure to note the date to destroy them and annihilate them, men, women, and children. Do not leave anyone for refuge. Signed, Haman. That's the letter that is written in the Medrash.
Remarkable similarity to the prophet handed today.
Absolutely, yeah. That's the first thing that I thought of when I saw this. Like the form of anti-Semitism has never changed. It's very, very old. It's always tried to be embellished in falsehoods and false statements and twisted, revisionist history. So this was it. This is from the times of Haman. It was like this. So that's why it was one of my favorites. So when you eat a Haman tashma, reading the letter, it's so juicy, This is so embedded in Persian history, as I'm saying, that the Persians have their own chronicles of this, that they learn about this. It's part of a lot of them learn this in the Iranian schools. It's part of Persian history, is learning the story of what happened to Haman, because it's not just that, they don't learn from the perspective of, the great miracle God did for the Jews. They view it from the perspective of the Jews massacred, 73,000 Iranians on this day. And they actually have a name for it. Yeah, they have an actual name for it. Now, the official Iranian government position is actually quite friendly towards the Jews in this, that they hold the holidays very precious, because let's not forget, Mordechai was the viceroy, Esther was, so they're very part of Persian history, of Iranian history, so they actually treasure and venerate the resting places of Mordechai, and some say Esther, in Hamadan, in Iran. But a few years ago, they until then it was funded, the upkeep, the guards. They're very respectful of it. Until then it was independently. It was maybe the city of Hamadan, or it was a municipality that was in charge of the upkeep and paying the guards for guarding the building of the resting places of Mordechai. So the Iranian government passed a law that from now on they would take upon themselves the upkeep of all the expenses. So when they passed this law, a number of Hamadanians, Hamadan residents, started protesting there in front of the kever of Mordechai and Esther, saying that, decrying the legislation of the government, saying that this is that they're responsible for killing 73,000 Iranians. How can you protect their resting places? This is just funny. This was their claim. And I think the most ironic thing about all that is that it's so funny that here is Iran, who I think is the leading country of Holocaust denial, or at least in the leadership level, which only occurred 70 years ago, and here they're bringing a claim against protecting Mordechai and Esther for something, a claim for over 2,000 years ago, of 73 Iranians died. So they don't believe something that happened 60 years ago, but something that happened 2,000 and something years ago they believe. It was just really funny. Really ironic to read that. Okay. So let's go straight into, for the time we have remaining, let's do one mitzvah. Let's do Mishloach Manos. We'll start with Mishloach Manos. I believe, right, that's the most pertinent mitzvah right now that everyone's thinking about, no? Of Purim. There's nothing we have to do about Megillah. You're not writing a Megillah, right? Matanas Lavyanim, you just have to give. But Mishloach Manos, you have to prepare, you have to think about. We're going to start with Mishloach Manos. Okay, so the mitzvah of Mishloach Manos, one of the 4 mitzvahs of Purim. Again, men and women are obligated in everything together. Similarly, on Purim, there's no difference between men and women. Regarding Megillah reading, we'll get into regarding the Nusach of the Bracha, there's a little bit of a difference, but other than that, men and women are obligated in all the mitzvahs. Now, before we begin Mishloach Manos, let's first discuss the reason behind sending Mishloach Manos. Why do we send it? Why is it the mitzvah done? So we have here a machlekes between 2 of the earlier authorities in understanding the purpose of Mishloach Manos. The Monais Levi, who was written by our very own Sfas resident, Rav Shlomo Alkabetz, who says that the purpose of Mishloach Manos is to increase love and friendship, to increase Avas Reim and Avas Yisrael. That's the purpose. And he says that the reason why this was established is because, the Rebbe explains, is because that the Purim story happened as a result of what Haman said, that the Jewish nation are a scattered nation. We're scattered everywhere. We're not united. We have a lot of infighting. So in order to battle that infighting, that machlekes, we on Purim try to emphasize Avos Yisrael and Achdus Yisrael, which is the truth is that we really see that even though during the whole year there may be a lot of discord of different groups of Jewry, somehow on Purim everyone can get together. Everyone can suddenly put aside all their opposing matters, and everyone can love each other and forget about. It's like at a wedding. At a wedding, you don't think about. You're so full of simcha. You don't think about your enemies. Even if your enemy comes, you accept him. So too on Purim, Baruch Hashem. So this is the whole point of giving Mishloach Manos. Reb Shlomo Alkabetz, the author of Lichadeidi, the hymn of Lichadeidi. So he composed Lichadeidi that we say every Shabbos, and he likewise wrote a commentary on the Megillah called Monais Levi, or the presence of Levi. He was a Levi, Shlomo HaLevi Alkabetz. The second approach is of the Trumas Hadesh, one of the great Ashkenazi Rishonim, who holds that no, I mean, of course, friendship, Avos Yisrael, it's a great thing, but that is not the purpose of this mitzvah. The purpose of this mitzvah is so people have a lot of food to eat for their Purim meal. It's to increase the Purim meal. And in fact, in Shulchan Aruch, when we try, if we want to open up a Shulchan Aruch and see, I want to learn about the laws of Mishloach Manos. Where is it? I go through the chapters, the index or the table of contents, and it's not there. I see it says Megillah reading, chapter 286 through 291. I'd see it says Matanis Lev Yainim, chapter 294. I'd see it says Purim Suda, 695, not 2, all 6. And no Mishlach Manas. Why? Because it's hidden under the Purim Suda laws. Now, why did the Mechaber do that? So this is a nice proof to the Perush of the Trumas Hadeshin that the reason is because it's part of a subcategory of the Purim Suda.
What's his name? Sorry.
The Trumas Hadeshin's name was Rabbi Yisrael Isserlin.
Oh. Yisrael Isserlin.
He's one of the major Ashkenazi poskim of Rishonim. A lot of halachas that we do today, even Sfaradim, are based on his rulings. There are a number of practical ramifications between these two reasons. Number one, what happens if the giver or receiver don't know each other? Who gave it to them? If I dropped it off, if I sent my kid to give to them and I didn't write the name, and they don't know who my kid is, so they don't know I sent it, so it doesn't increase friendship. They may have a beautiful Suda, they'll have the nice lamb chops I provided them, but they will have no clue who sent to them. So either they increase friendship with every Jew in the city, or there will be no friendship increase because they don't know me. So they don't know who sent it to them, right? They don't have the identity of the sender. So according to the Manais Levi, there's no friendship increase, you're not Yaitse. According to the Trumas Hadeshin, you are Yaitse because you increase their meal. It's not about the friendship. Also in the opposite case, if I don't know who the receiver is. For example, an organization says, send Mishloach Manas to poor people, or send Mishloach Manas to Chayalim, or send Mishloach Manas, and they're going to send it for you. So I have no clue who it's being sent to. So I don't increase friendship with that individual because I don't know him. From this we can learn a general principle that even though we always like to do matan b'seiser, giving discreetly and being humble, if revealing the identity will help engage greater friendship with the party, it's better to let them know. Sometimes it happens in relationships, family, we do things for them under the table, they don't even know, and we see that they're not paying back in response to what we would like them to pay back for what we invested. But sometimes they're not even aware that we invested and we hid it from them or we didn't make it apparent. But nonetheless, the emotions feel that I'm deserving of a little better of an investment from that person, the relationship. So it's very important for there to be very clear understanding of when a gift is being given or some sign of affection, that it should know who's giving it, and then a person, Klev Adam Ba'adam, can respond and increase in friendship and love, etc.
There was an idea, my friend was telling me, this really happened, so she was going through a lot of financial streets, and she found, it happened in Spot, and she found money that was outside of her door with no note, nothing on it. And she said she loved it so much in a way because everybody she saw on the street, she smiled and was so grateful because she thought maybe it could have been them, maybe it could have been them. And this is the true story, this really happened. She said this over like 3 weeks ago, one of my teachers.
Right. So by tzedakah, obviously there's a concept called the highest level of tzedakah is matam aseser, is giving discreetly, so the person is not embarrassed. And obviously, so by tzedakah that's definitely good. But if it's someone, let's say that person who gave them the money was someone who had a little bit of beef with them, so it's important for them to know that I'm giving it. Okay, we're Mitzvah continue next week.
So you are going to do next week?
I don't see a reason why not. Should.